Day 29 will be our last full day in San Francisco. We'll leave the hotel and drive over to the dock for the Alcatraz boat, take the boat out to Alcatraz, and then take the tram up to the top of the hill to see the cell block. Then return on the boat to the boat dock, take the classic streetcars over to Pier 39, eat at Bubba Gump Shrimp Co, go to the Aquarium of the Bay, and then return to the hotel for the night. We're going to be leaving early in the morning since we have an 8 o'clock boat ride out to Alcatraz. And this video is going to be longer than most of my videos. It'll be about 45 minutes long because I include a tour of the cell block in the middle. Soon we're parking our car just outside of the Pier 33 where we'll catch the boat. We'll be catching the boat here and going out to Alcatraz and looking around the island. But we have to wait a little bit, and so let's look around a little here on the pier. We have a model of Alcatraz, and we're going to look around it, walk around it, and look at the various buildings that we'll be looking at later. The dock was built in 1854. And then we'll be going through the guardhouse and Sallyport complex, which was built in 1857. The Post Exchange Store and Officers Club was built in 1910, but a fire burned it down in 1970 and only a shell remains. The Marine Prison Building was built in 1907 to 1912, housed 600 prisoners. The Warden's House was also destroyed in the fire of 1970, and we're not going to be looking at it. And the barracks and apartments were built so correction officers and their families had places to stay. Industrial buildings were there for them to work at various projects that they needed to do. And the military schoolhouse was built in 1920s. From the front, it looks like a church almost. We'll see it in a little bit later as we go up. We'll be taking this boat to Alcatraz. I'll be sitting on top and Deborah will be sitting inside. And then soon it's time to get going. Over there is Angel Island. It was used like Ellis Island in the east to process people coming from the west. And this is Alcatraz Island. Some people think that's where the people swim to that escaped.
Penitentiary closed.
Over there is the Bay Bridge to Oakland. We took that when we went to the Oakland Zoo a few days ago. Goes through the island and keeps on going.
American.
In the opposite direction, that's the Golden Gate Bridge. As you can see, it's in the fog somewhat right now. And now we're approaching Alcatraz. Boats run back and forth every 30 minutes, starting about 8 o'clock in the morning. Alcatraz has been many things. At first it was a Civil War fort to protect the bay. Later on they changed it to a military detention center and built the cell block at the top. From 1934 to 1963 it was a maximum security prison. This video from Drain the Ocean shows you that Alcatraz is just a rock sticking up out of a sand floor of the San Francisco Bay. And this is a white shark attack on a seal right off the dock. It is a dangerous place to swim in. In 1973, it was opened to the public and became part of the Park Service. Today it's a flower garden to some extent, as there are many different gardeners that plant things here. From 1969 to 1972, it was occupied by Native Americans seeking independence. When you get there, there's a ranger orientation talk, and up on the hill, those are guard towers that were used during the prison time here. There are many things to do here, and a steep climb up to the cell house. We're going to take the tram up this route. It's almost a mile long and climbs 33 stories, so it's a very steep climb to go up to the cell house. And then we're going to look around the cell house before returning. Let's get on the tram and let's get started. The tram is mainly for handicapped people. Most people just walk up. This building on the left was part of the old Civil War fort, the first 2 stories, and you can see up on the second floor that they have gun ports. And then it was used for barracks for the soldiers and later to house correctional officials and their families. Now we're passing the Post Exchange and Officers Club. As you can see, it burned in 1970 during the Indian occupation. Not sure why. Next we passed the military school. It looks like a church up front. It was later used to house bachelor correction officers. And upward we trudge. You can see how steep the hill is here and how hard it is to get up. We're glad we took the ride. There's still a ways up to the cell block. When it was finished in 1912, it was the largest steel reinforced concrete building in the world. Next we passed the morgue, the place where they would bring the ones who died here. There were no executions here. As you can see, we don't even get all the way to the top of the hill before the next boat is arriving. About every 30 minutes you can go back on any boat. Over there is the water tower as we arrive at the top of the hill. There's a whole lot to look at in this complex. We'll be doing this section. And now it's time to head on in. This would be the way that any new prisoner would have come through these gates and into the first room that they come to, which will be the shower room. As a new prisoner arrived, he would have to take off his clothes and take a shower. And then they would get 2 showers every week from then on. There was no privacy here so that the guards could see them shower and make sure they were not attacking each other. Then they would go to the clothing room where they would get their clothes. For the next 25 minutes, you're going to be listening to selected portions of the audio tour of the cell block that we would have heard while we were there.
Thank you for joining us on our tour of the Alcatraz cell house. You should now be standing under the sign that says, "Tour begins here." On your right, look for a photo panel entitled Tour Narrators. Walk over to it.
Walk, do not run when moving from one place to another.
I'm Pat Mahoney, former Alcatraz correctional officer, and I'll be your guide. I served 7 years on the Rock. These first photos introduce some of my fellow officers.
I am Philip Bergen, Captain of the Guards, United States Penitentiary, Alcatraz, California.
Well, my name is George DeVincenzi. I used to play checkers with Robert Stroud. I don't think I ever beat him.
My name is Ronald Battles. I asked whether they hired blacks out there. You know how it was in the 50s.
Continue to the left, to the next photo panel. These are some of the prisoners whose voices you'll hear.
Yeah, my name is Leon Whitey Thompson. My number was 1465. I was a man that had total hatred in them days. I hated anything that walked or crawled on this earth. I was a man who was dead inside. You couldn't hurt me no more, see?
I'm John Banner. My Alcatraz number was 1133. I'm a thief, you know. I ended up about number 17 or something like that on the most wanted.
You were a number, you weren't a name. I wasn't Jim Crow, and hell, I was number 586. Everybody wants to be an individual. They want to be a human. And you weren't. Hit the rock.
My name is Darwin Kuhn, number 1422. Figured I'm never going to get out. Yeah, I'm going to sit right here until I die.
Now, continue to your left. Up ahead, you'll see an open gate on your right. This was called the cutoff. Walk through the cutoff. The Alcatraz cell house opened as a federal prison in 1934. Within these walls lived the country's toughest, most dangerous, and most famous prisoners. As soon as you exit the cutoff, immediately turn right onto the next corridor. It's called Broadway. Walk slowly along the line of cells on the right side. Each cell has a number above the cell door. On your right, find cell number 113. Stop and look inside. Broadway was the first stop for arriving prisoners.
We went right down Broadway, you know, in our birthday suits. And all the guys, you know, are howling and
Well, here's a typical Alcatraz cell. Every one of them in the cell house exactly alike.
I had a metal tabletop and a little chair there. That was about it. So it was barren.
5 feet wide, 9 feet long, 7 feet high. That's what I call a little box.
No decorations allowed. Anything. Couldn't paste anything on the wall.
Continue to the next cell. Waiting on the bed for each new prisoner was a copy of the official rules and regulations.
This is the rules of the cell house. Your cell is subject to search at any time.
Your towel had to be folded up and put on your shelf. Your toothbrush, and they used to give us tooth powder in little green containers.
Now, continue ahead to the next cell.
I guess like a cockroach feels in a matchbox.
You may smoke in your cell in the library.
We were issued a pack of wings on a Monday, a Wednesday, and a Friday. Every inmate, whether he smoked or not.
Continue to the next cell.
Sweep your cell and place the trash in the trash
I
bin.
knew where you'd mark everything in that cell. And then pretty soon that cell became like a part of me, or I became a part of the cell.
Look ahead to the far end of Broadway. You should see a clock on the wall. Walk towards it.
Alcatraz is always classed as the end of the line, the point of no return. It was like going into the ground. You know, when you're buried, you're gone forever.
Beneath it is the area prisoners call Times Square. When you get to Times Square, turn left. Look over towards the right and find the large photo of the prison recreation yard. Walk over to it.
This is the rules of the cell house. Your cell is subject to search at any time.
Prisoners had a decision to make, whether to obey the rules or not, to do good time or bad time. That decision affected their lives dramatically.
An inmate is given housing, good food, medical attention, and all the necessities of life.
Everything else was a privilege. Time to exercise outside, getting books and mail all had to be earned. One of their favorite privileges was the recreation yard.
The most pleasant place, I believe, on Alcatraz, and the most appreciated. The handball court, the horseshoe court.
Prisoners also played bridge out in the yard. They used dominoes instead of cards.
They came out with a system called Auto Bridge. You played it all by yourself. Guys got so wound up in this bridge thing. that they ate and slept it. They'd go out there and it would be so cold that you didn't think you could stay out there, yet they'd stay out there for 3 hours and play bridge. And if you're occupied with bridge and you're studying bridge, you're not thinking about going over the wall.
Prisoners who chose not to behave ended up in a harsher place, isolation. You should be facing the photo panel. Look to your left. Directly ahead is an open steel door marked D block. Go through this door. D block was a prison within Alcatraz, the treatment unit.
This place is going to operate on the basis that you do what you're told, and you're going to get a fair break. If you don't behave yourself, we're going to come down on you like a ton of bricks.
Move a few steps into the room and find a place to stand. Look up at the 3 tiers of cells. Unruly or violent prisoners were sent here. They stayed in their cells 24 hours a day. Typically, they were only allowed out once a week for a shower and exercise.
Now in this cell block, we have 42 of the least popular cells in Alcatraz. Although by far they are the best, the roomiest, and the nicest state-of-the-art cells that were available in this prison.
It was cold, it was damp. The wind used to just blow through there. You could hear it. At night you could hear it whistling through the windows.
One of the more infamous prisoners to live here in D Block was convicted killer Robert Stroud, the so-called Birdman.
And almost immediately upon his arrival at Alcatraz, he was relegated to the treatment unit. And he didn't bring his birds along with him, which made him very unhappy, but he brought all his bad habits with him, which made us unhappy. And there he remained for several years, being obnoxious and noisy and agitating and busily writing. Fluent in 3 languages, a mathematical expert, brilliant man.
He was a psychopath.
Suicidal, homicidal maniac.
Now, turn to face the windows. Walk over to the photo panel on the wall. You'll see a photo of Robert Stroud. Alongside Stroud, you'll see some other well-known prisoners. Alcatraz was built for men like these.
Alvin Karpus, you gotta watch out for him. Former public enemy #1.
Creepy Karpus. When you seen Creepy, you wouldn't have to be told he was creepy because he walked on his toes.
He had Kelly.
Machine Gun Kelly.
Nice fella, never give you any troubles at all. Very accommodating, polite.
Mickey Cohen, Frankie Garbo.
And Capone.
Ain't a fool with Capone, see? He was a street fighter. He's a big man. He was in good shape. The only thing, his brain was gone. He had syphilis. Well, eventually it drove him crazy.
Now, turn back to the cells. Walk over to the cells on the far right with solid green doors. This was solitary confinement, the whole. Cells 9 through 14.
When the cell was occupied, the regulations required that the light be on.
But we kept the lights off when they were in there. They were in the dark.
You may enter one of the cells if you wish.
But if you would close your eyes like right now, close your eyes and seal your eyes up with your hand, with a little concentration you can see a light. And pretty soon that light will get brighter. And you got to concentrate on this. And after a while, not a short while, this takes time and practice, but pretty soon you can almost put your own TV there. And you can see things. And you can go on trips, and this is what I did.
Now, open your eyes. Step out of the hole. Walk through the nearest doorway marked library. Continue into the large open area. This was the prison library.
You put your request on a library card. If the book was available, they'd bring it and put it in the bars for you.
Prisoners with reading privileges could subscribe to approved magazines.
And If it had some story about some convict out of Nebraska or something, that was cut out. Never mind that you might have been reading a serial and it was on the back of one of them pages.
Prisoners who behaved could also take correspondence courses.
Took a course from the University of Pennsylvania on animal husbandry. The gestation period for a pig is 3 months, 3 weeks, and 3 days.
Now, let's continue. Walk out of the library, immediately turn left. Walk toward the recreation yard doorway, up ahead. Stay along the left wall of the corridor. You're now on C.D. Street.
C and D block. They call it C.D. Street for C and D.
Escape attempts got the attention, but in Alcatraz's 30 years history, most days were uneventful and repetitive. Stop at the first furnished cell. Most accepted that this cell block, however grim, was home for now. Some considered this sunny area the most desirable part of the prison to live.
It was like coming back and greeting an old friend, really.
Take a look into the cells.
I used to do a lot of oil paintings on Alcatraz. If I was painting a scene of the Swiss Alps or something like that, hey, I'm right up there skiing as I'm painting, and I used to escape that way.
My grandmother taught me how to crochet when I was a kid. So I taught a lot of guys how to crochet. Big tough guys sitting in there with a needle and crocheting.
Move on to the next cell. In the 1950s, radios were installed at Alcatraz. You might have noticed what looks like a light switch box with 2 holes. Prisoners plugged their earphones in there to listen to the radio.
We had 2 stations we could plug into. They let us listen to such programs as Boston Blackie,
Peloton, How Gun Would Travel,
baseball games, and basketball games.
Move on to the next cell.
At nighttime, between 6:30 and 7:30, they have what they call a music hour. They play harmonicas or a guitar or whatnot. They had one guy over there, and he used to play one of these slide trombones. And I think he only knew 3 notes, da da da, da da da. For an hour, that's all I hear, da da da, da da da.
New Year's Eve, everybody had a saxophone or a clarinet or a guitar or whatever started playing. Then they'd take their tin cups and they'd rack them back and forth across the front of the Mars.
Turn around and look up at the windows. They face San Francisco and the setting sun.
The yacht club, which was directly across from the island, would always have a big New Year's party. If the wind was blowing from that direction to the rock, you could actually hear people laughing, you could hear music, you could hear girls laughing, you could hear all the sounds that were coming from the free world at the rock. But New Year's was always the night we heard it.
Continue to the end of C.D. Street. When you get there, turn left. Look for 4 small windows in the wall on the right. They're marked Visitation. The prisoners called this Pekin Place.
When they'd written me that letter and said, you're dead, don't ever come back, we've told your sister you're dead, the whole bit. I'd been there at the Rock 7.5 years. The guard came up and racked my door open and said, Quillen? And I said, yeah. Or said 586, and I said, yeah. You got a visitor? And I told him, I said, you're full of crap. He said, you got a damn visitor, go down to the visiting office.
Approach the visitors' windows.
I thought, hell, I'll see some good-looking chick at least, if nothing else, And I walked up there, and here's this good-looking girl.
I was nervous, didn't know what to expect.
I knew who she was when I got a real good look at her, and when she said Jimmy, which was what she always called me, hell, I knew it was my sis.
Once I saw Jimmy, it was, he didn't look different, and he was overwhelmed, and he couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe it, that we were there and that I had grown up and that I'd come to see him.
Art Dollison got the news that there had been an escape. 3 men were missing from the cell house.
We all believed in the escape-proof myth, and this turned out to be one of the most sophisticated escape attempts in U.S. history.
Turn around and look into the control room. When they heard the escape siren, every officer on the island rushed here to report for duty. Prison authorities had made their own plans in case of escape.
The escape response plans were located in a locked safe, and so my father had to go and get the key or the combination and unlock the safe, and then that would determine which officers were armed, where they were positioned, and make sure that all the bases were covered in any kind of an escape.
Now go back and continue down the corridor along the left side. Walk back into the cell block.
Yeah, I wanted to escape. That was in my mind constantly.
You cannot take away from a man the thought that he wants his freedom.
As you re-enter the cell block, immediately turn right. We're heading for what the inmates call Michigan Avenue. Walk to the large photo panel up ahead. Earlier, on the morning of June the 12th, 1962, Officer Bill Long had been in charge of the first count of the day.
And at the sound of the bell, the inmates are supposed to be dressed and up, standing in front of their doors for count. Bill, there's a guy up here, I can't get up. Well, it's the sergeant says, I'll get him up.
Look across the aisle for cell number 138.
I'll wake him up.
Walk over to it and look inside.
Hey!
And he was laying in there, so I reached in through the bars and I hit the pillow. And Lord knows what happened. The head fell off on the floor. The guy said that I shot back about 6. There's his face, there's his head, hair on his head and everything. One of the other officers there said, here's another one, Bill, right here. There's one up here, Bill. And I said, don't touch him, don't touch it. A horror movie. And I was right in the middle of it.
Prisoners Frank Lee Morris and two brothers, John and Clarence Anglin, had escaped the night before. They made dummy heads to fool the officers. Morris was the brains. The Anglin brothers, they were just swamp rats out of Florida. According to the reports, the men enlarged the vent openings in the back of their cells with stolen spoons.
I'll give you a ton of spoons, and I want to see how long it'll take you to go through one of them walls there. Them walls may be old, but let me tell you, you're not going through them cells with them spoons.
They didn't make those holes with spoon handles. They had the necessary tools, hammers and chisels and drills.
No one thought it was possible to get through concrete using spoons, but in fact they were heavy gauge steel, and you break off the bowl and now you've got a drill. And in fact 13 spoon handles and a ladle handle were actually found hidden in 2 cans of cement paint after the escape was over.
Now, continue to your left to the end of the cell block. Just around the corner, look for a glass door. Inside is the utility corridor. The 3 men climbed up these pipes to the roof.
At approximately 10:30 that night, there was a sound like a hubcap when you're dropping it, goes, but very loud.
They worked for over a year to get up onto that roof, and that would have been the most fantastic moment to have stood there knowing that you actually got out of the most secure building in the country.
The question has never been answered. Did they make it to freedom?
My theory is that they drowned.
They went to South America, because I know they were all studying Spanish.
The men have never been found. Directly ahead of you is the dining hall. Step through the doorway and move toward the bars at the back of the dining hall. 3 times a day, all the men in general population gathered here for 20-minute meals. Imagine 200 plus men, each armed with a knife, fork, and spoon. This was potentially the most dangerous room in the cell house.
And if you notice up on the ceiling there, you see these canisters up there dotted around. That's tear gas. And we nicknamed the dining room the gas chamber. It so happened during the history of Alcatraz, they never did trip the button. If they did trip it, they would have made a fatal mistake because them 2 guards in there and the lieutenant would never have gotten out of there alive.
Now walk to the barred area at the far end of the dining room. Behind it is the kitchen area. Notice the knife rack on the left. The shape of each knife was outlined on the rack. This way, officers could tell immediately if one was missing. Even so, some knives disappeared.
I think about 3-4 men got killed with kitchenware.
And I heard that old familiar pop slap, you know, and Chili had drove it into Sosa's back. It was just like an ice pick. He stuck it right in the back, and that was the pop slap I heard.
Alcatraz, I don't think you ever heard anybody say anything disparaging about the meals.
It was a strict requirement of the Bureau of Prisons that the food not only be palatable and healthy, but attractively served.
When they first started making spaghetti and putting it on the line, it was pretty good. And it kept going down and down and down.
Noodles and plum juice.
So somebody said, damn it, the next time they put that spaghetti out on the line, we're going to turn the tables over. The following week, there was a damn spaghetti.
Pretty soon all the tables are coming like domino. Pop, 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 pop.
And the lives of those officers in that dining room were in jeopardy. And so old Burden just took it in hand and took that Thompson and knocked out 3 panes of glass. Buck, waited, buck, waited, buck, knocked out the 3rd. Got everybody's attention. I jammed that actuating lever back and she went click and they all heard it and they knew what it meant. And I said, Lieutenant, blow your whistle, just quietly. He blew his whistle. Inmates started to get up and they marched out of the dining room just like little lambs.
At the end of 3 decades, over 1,500 men had served time on the Rock. By then, Alcatraz had served its own time. After years of harsh wind and weather, the buildings were badly deteriorated. The isolated island was too expensive to run. And now in the 1960s, prison reformers preached rehabilitation instead of punishment. Early in 1963, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy ordered Alcatraz closed.
The last day we were there, we ate breakfast in the dining room, showered, and put on clean uniforms and shackles and handcuffs down to the boat.
I saw the last inmate leave. The last inmate leave.
And I went from hell to heaven. Then when I stopped and think what I was doing over there, locked up in those gun galleries and towers and wrestling inmates, and yes, heaven and hell.
And I remember when they released me, I've been locked up 15 years, and during all this time I never had no visits, no letters, no nothing. And I'm watching the cars whizzing by and the people walking. Everything was moving too fast and I didn't know how to move with it. And then I remember how envious I was of these people because they all had a destination. They were all going someplace and I didn't know where I was going. And I was scared to death.
Now after shopping in the gift shop, it's time to head back down to the boats. When we get down to the bottom, a boat is waiting for us. This is a different one than the one we were on. We're going to get on this boat, and we're going to stay inside for this trip. Now at about noon, the Golden Gate Bridge is able to be seen, and we go back to the dock where we started. We parked here, came over to the dock to catch the boats. Then when we come back, we're going to catch the classic streetcars down the Embarcadero to Pier 39, go eat at Bubba Gump's, then go over and look at the Sealions, do a little shopping down the area before going to the Aquarium by the sea. And then we will return to our car and drive home. We have several classic streetcars here. Remember, streetcars are the ones attached to the wires above. We went on the Steel City streetcar, the Jewett car Type B, and the Type A rail car. And we made it to Pier 39. To be honest, Pier 39 is basically a tourist trap with a lot of places to eat and gift shops. And we're going to spend a little bit of time here looking around before we eat at Bubba Gump's. They have a small boat that's a bay taxi that'll take you from place to place on the water rather than driving, and we're going to eat lunch at Bubba Gump Shrimp Co, as we said. It is out on the end of the pier and has some good views of the water, and over there, that's Alcatraz out the window. She escaped. They let her out. Bill will have a shrimp and rice dish, and I will have fish and chips. Now we walk over to see the California Sealions. There are several little piers here that they pull out on. Right now there's actually not that many here. As you can see from this picture, most of the little piers are empty. Sometimes these will get totally full of sea lions, a few out on the end, and there's one swimming. Some of the sea lions are off by themselves, like this male on another pier. The fencing around the pier area has locks all over it. These are to bind people together in love and usually has the initials of both people on them. Now it's time to go to the Aquarium of the Bay. We actually have to go up on the second floor. There's an elevator so we can start looking. Let's look around some. Can you see the fish here? There's actually two of them. Oh, there's one he moved. And one over on the left, you can see its tail. They're very well camouflaged, these English sole. There are two giant Pacific octopuses, but the reflections just look like a whole lot more, and they're very active. This giant sea bass is over 500 pounds. And now it's time to head back to the hotel for the night. This will be our last night in San Francisco. And then we arrive at the Castle Inn and we drive up into the parking area. And this will bring day 29 to an end.